Well, greetings once again, Edwardsians. Welcome to the YouTube page of edwardstudies.com. Unabashedly the geekiest page on the interweb. Yours truly, the host here, Pastor Matt Everhard, looking today at a book review of George Marsden's A Short Life of Jonathan Edwards. Now, that name, George Marsden, should sound familiar to you Edwardsians because Marsden is also the author of probably the definitive biography of Jonathan Edwards, aside from that of Ian Murray done by Banner of Truth. But Marsden is the author of the Yale biography, Edwards, A Life, which is fantastic at well over 500 pages of expertly and proficiently documented material, researching the life of Jonathan Edwards from every possible quarter and angle, looking under every possible dimension of Edwards' life. That book is fantastic. I wholeheartedly recommend it. But that is not the book before us today. This book right here is called A Short Life of Jonathan Edwards, and I want to talk just a little bit about it today. It does come with some very excellent reviews by Tim Keller and fellow Edwards scholar Harry Stout. But probably you're asking the same question that I asked myself, and that is simply this. If I've already read the behemoth, the big one, the dictionary, the encyclopedic, if that's a word, biography and treatment of Edwards, why would I want to read a shorter edition by the same author? Well, great question. So, let's break that down. First of all, is this simply a synopsis of Edwards' A Life, the big one? No. No, it is not. This is a complete rewriting of Jonathan Edwards, and notably, it is different in several very obvious ways. First of all, you can see here that the length of the book, we're talking here about a biography that comes in at about 143 pages. So this is not a massive tome. Secondly, you're going to notice when you look through this book that there are not a lot of internal citations or footnotes to this book. Not a lot of scholarly academic flourishes, we might call them. And that actually speaks to what is so charming about this book, and that is simply that A Short Life of Jonathan Edwards reads much more like a tale that you would tell over dinner or perhaps in a classroom or even at a campfire. I know that sounds strange. This book reads much more like a tale that one would tell rather than a book that one would research. And I think that actually adds a very charming dimension to reading a biography of Edwards. For instance, one of the things that Marsden does in this book is that he continually compares Jonathan Edwards to Benjamin Franklin. And you may say, well, what do those two guys have to do with each other? One is a Puritan, Reformed Calvinist preacher. The other was quite secular, a businessman, a publisher, a polymath, and various other categories. What do these guys have to do with each other? Well, Marsden very expertly uses Franklin and Edwards as a foil to one another's lives. Beginning from the very first chapter 1, Edwards, Franklin, and Their Times, and he compares these two men throughout this book. It's almost like that's the stitch or the thread that binds this telling of the tale of Edwards together. Now, do you get anything different in this book than you get in the massive behemoth? Yes, you do. You get a different perspective. You get a more colloquial telling of the life of Edwards. You get some nuances that you didn't see in the major biography. And I think this results in a shorter biography that is actually quite pleasant to the reader. Now, I will tell you, I've been studying Jonathan Edwards for several years now. My goodness, I've read many of his works. I've read many biographies of him, about him, sermons, and yet I still am delighted by the simple narrative story of the life of Jonathan Edwards, the preacher. I guess that's because we have so much in common, and I find myself being exposed in one way as I see the heart of a man who struggled with his time, struggled with his calling, and yet at the very base of who he was, he desired to be obedient. Did he mess up? Yes, of course he did. Was he a perfect pastor? No, of course not. But was he a man who tried to be faithful in his times? Yes. Yes, he was. And I think that story comes to life charmingly in George M. Marsden's A Short Life of Jonathan Edwards. What I'm going to do is I'm going to post a link down here in the description of this video to Amazon, where you can go and buy this book directly, and I hope you will enjoy it as much as I have. Well, thanks for tuning in once again to edwardstudies.com and our YouTube page for us, and we will see you again, Edwardsians, when we will geek out on the life and work of Jonathan Edwards.